don't know about you, but I have a real problem with now, because we are fixated with now. CEOs don't care much beyond their stock options. Politicians only work to get re-elected, so they're focused on now. Consumers want instant gratification. It's all now. That's the economy, right? But what about the future? Is there any mechanism that could see us invest in the future? I mean, sure, we invest in our pensions, but what about the planet, for example? Are we prepared to compromise our lifestyle if it creates a better economy and a survival economy in the long run? That's today on the Debunking Economics podcast with Professor Steve Keen. I'm Phil Dobbie. Welcome along. Right, well, the focus on risk and reward, that is what powers how the financial world, well, how the economy works, isn't it, really? And as a consequence, but, you know, particularly, I guess it starts with the financial world and then expands to the broader economy. And that focus is very much on the here and now. We value what we want now. We have little regard to the future, perhaps with a few exceptions. If we've got kids, we might be concerned about their future. But the benefit of that, some economists would say, is that we allocate resources based on needs as they are. The downside, obviously, is that we ignore the needs of future generations. And that's why we don't want to pay now for climate change prevention today, and the cost of that decision will be paid for by our children. And yet, interestingly, isn't it? You know, we talk about debt the other way, don't we? We say, well, we don't want to pass debt on to our children, but we also don't want to spend in favour of our children. This is a fundamental flaw in economics, Steve, isn't it? There's no time scale.
Yeah, and this is arguably why we're going to have a ecological crisis, not in the lifetime of our kids, but our own damn lifetimes, frankly, because we continued putting off. We can't perceive the future. And one of my favourite bands was the Doors, and there's a wonderful line in one of the Jim Morrison songs: "The future's uncertain, and the end is always near." And you know, I think he died at 27, didn't he? Proving his own hypothesis.
Yeah.
But fundamentally, that fact is. We're not as extreme as Jim Morrison and how much our focus is on the here and now and gratification immediately. But it is something which we don't have a sense of ourselves as custodians of life on this planet. And this may reflect much more on Western civilization than it does on tribal civilizations at some point. That the contrast between what American Indian philosophy was before the white man turned up, and then what happened when the white man got there is a classic. But I still think overall we do not have our sense of ourselves as preserving what we have for the future, and because of that, we have completely destroyed the sustainability of the system we're in now, and the crunch may well occur, you know, in the lifetime of the baby boomers, who have probably been the most short-sighted generation in history. I think we're going to see that crunch because of this inability to look more than 10, even 5 years in advance. People just don't do it.
And the system
we're all in the here and now.
We are in the here and now, and the system demands it, don't they? So, and I mentioned last week Mark Carney's book, which actually, you know, the first few pages has been a good read. So I'm holding out hope. Mm-hmm. He talks about he talks about value quite a bit, which is what we were talking about last week, and how market value might actually be out of kilter with what's the best for us. So he gives the example of the clearing of the Amazon region, and it only begins to have market value once you've cleared the Amazon. So the Amazon, as it is, you know, is a lot of trees, you know, wherever it's left, has no value except for the planet, of course, because, you know, it's been described as the Earth's lung. But from an economic point of view, it's got no value until you start clearing it, so you can start, creating value from that by selling crops. So it's, of course, destroying the biodiversity of the planet. But he makes the point, until that happens, it doesn't create any value, and the destruction of the rainforest appears on no ledger. His words. I mean, he's got a point, you know, that we actually pay ourselves to destroy the planet.
Yeah, and actually, that I haven't yet read the recent report that the UK government commissioned, the Dasgupta report into climate change. Because I've read so much neoclassical crap, I can't face reading any more of it, frankly. But I know that one part of that was to propose we should put a price on the environment. And therefore, if you knock down an old growth tree, then you have a major negative price to pay. And by valuing the external environment valuing the environment the same way you value the market system, that is supposed to solve all the problems. And I just think this is a massively short-sighted attitude. Again, the whole short-sighted thing, because we're trying to use something which is contained within the environment as a way of measuring the value of the environment. And as you said, that's just we cannot know the price for carbon, for example, that's going to mean we don't cause the West Antarctic ice shelf to collapse. We simply don't know. And the idea that you can put a price and that it will solve everything is just utterly ludicrous. It's this worshipping of price in economic theory, which has turned out how we think about capitalism, but that is made worse the humanity's own tendency to be short-sighted and not consider the future.
But it's better than nothing, isn't it? If we say, well, okay, if you're doing something which impacts on the environment, then you should pay for it, whether it's polluting or destroying something. The problem is, it's very easy for countries that have already destroyed the environment to say that, isn't it? Whereas developing nations, where they'll, if they want to get any growth whatsoever, there's going to be some degradation of the environment involved in that. Even if it's just a bit of land clearing to build a very green factory, they're still perhaps destroying natural rainforests. So it's very easy for us to say that, not so easy for the, unless you're going to plow piles of money into those developing nations to help them do it in a way which is going to be environmentally friendly, which of course we've got no interest in doing.
Yeah. I mean, you look at it and it's partly throw your hands up in horror and walk away and do the short-term thing and watch the world go to hell in a handbasket. There's a certain temptation to that, but my feeling, I'm honestly, if you ask me to say what I think are the odds of human civilization surviving the next century, I don't know that I'd get past the 50-50 odds in my overall thinking of whether we do it or not.
Because of climate change, or? Yeah,
because of climate change. Fundamentally, what we've done to the climate is, and like I got another bloody moron from the finance sector have a go at it. A tweet I put out recently saying how it's all a scam. I mean, God all fucking mighty, pardon me. The capacity for people to not even comprehend the collective impact we're having on the planet is just breathtakingly stupid. But it comes out of that short term, the topic you've chosen for this week, the short-termism, which is inherent in us as a species, and I think capitalism has made it worse. Not to say that actual socialism did particularly well. If you wanted to point a disaster of socialism, the best example I think is the Ural. I think it's called the Ural Sea, which was completely destroyed by the Soviet Union. So I'm not saying socialism would be better is it actually practiced in how it constrains our tendency to be too short-term as a species. But capitalism and the worshipping of the price system has made it far worse, and we're going to get to the point where this all falls apart. And think, how the hell did we get here? It's through that short-termism.
But that has to be embraced somehow in the market mechanism. We've got to find a way that without changing the entire system.
I mean,
because it's not going to happen otherwise, Steve. Because as you say,
you can have prohibition. Okay, that part of the planet is off limits to humans, right? And I frankly think we're going to have to do that. We will never do it collectively as a decision.
Anywhere in mind?
Pardon?
Wales.
Wales?
If you got anywhere in mind?
You don't mean the ones in the ocean here, okay? We're going to lose some Welsh subscribers out of this, you realise?
I think the Welsh would love the idea that less people would be coming into their part of the world. But look, I think this idea of Steve's probably hasn't got legs, has it? There has to be a way that the system can be adapted so that we lose this short-termism. We'll explore that more in the full version of this podcast. If you want to hear it in full, then you need to become a supporter on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Prof. Steve Keen, or go to debunkingeconomics.com and you can hear this podcast in full and all the others as well. I'm Phil Dobbie, he's Steve Keen, back again with another one next week. Thanks for listening.